In the name of Amen, Supreme, the all-powerful, the one and only true Lord, and Amen we trust as the Republic of Mentellect. The real 144,000 is being gathered in this day and time, the mentalists. Let me catch my breath. Give me a second. I was running doing stuff. Menzaka Aminun, to all my brothers and sisters, registered members of the Republic of Mentellect, and to all future mentalists who have yet to find their way home to the Republic of Mentellect, which is Amen's community. I send greetings out to you, and I send peace out to you, and I'm in the language by saying to you, Menzaka Aminu. Good evening, I'm your host, the intellectual NUBEN MENKARAYZZ, and this is Mentellect Radio. And tonight, we're going to be asking the question, are we black Africans or bronze Americans? You know, now in 2021, I will say it's 2021, the question of so-called black people's identity, heritage, race, where they come from, has always been in question on quite a bit, right? You still, in 2021, have black people, so-called black people, allowing white historians, other so-called historians of other races, telling us where we come from and how we got here and what we are as a nation of people, who we are as a nation of people. We always hearing this, you know, they picked up this thing, this Ancestry.com, which I think is a pure scam, all right? I think it's a pure scam. They picked up this, Ancestry.com, and they're supposed to be tracing your heritage all the way back to this point and that point and this point. And like I said, it's all a scam and it's all a bunch of nonsense, because you could have people in your family that come from this place or that place or this place or that place, but in all actuality, it doesn't matter. You know, nobody like so-called black people want to know exactly where it is they come from. Usually you start from where you're born, and then you track your way back. Right? You track your way back. Now, what is the answer that so-called black people, because I'm going to go into all of this tonight, what are the answers that so-called black people have been getting consistently through this so-called black history that they're given in the society by the so-called white man and these black parrots who call themselves black history professors, black history, whatever they're supposed to be? Right, they're teaching the curriculum that is given to my Caucasians. They teach that we come from Africa, that we are the product of a slave trade, and that black people all got here into this country through some African slave trade, some transatlantic slave trade. This is the story they give, the account they tell, right? And I did a broadcast one time where I have basically debunked all of this talk about, you know, our people getting here on slave ships going back to 1555 and all this other stuff, right? Now, was it a reality that slave ships did come here? Yeah. Was it a lot of slave ships? Absolutely not. Not enough to bring no 100 million or no real significant amount of so-called black people into this country. That's a load of BS. I already went into how you know that doesn't even make sense, because they tell you that most of the ships, you know, where you packing people in like sardines, people jumping off of ships, people fighting, people getting sick, people defecating on themselves, people getting, you know, all of this stuff, and you bringing people here who don't speak any English, and you're going to beat these people and force them to work, right? You're going to beat them and force them to learn English and get them to work. These people are sick, right? And of course, you know, they didn't have any real doctors at that time to, work on or heal those sick slaves, or those so-called sick slaves that came over here on the transatlantic slave trade. So most of them came over here, got diseases from the white man, and the white men were sick, right? So how was these people able to be made work ready, right? How were they able to be made work ready when they got all these diseases? They came over here, they can't speak the English, they don't know where they are, things like that. How are these people to be made work ready, right? They're scared, they don't know where the hell they at and things like that. How long can you keep doing that? How long can you keep doing that? How long does it take to get these people to work? Because as soon as they get off of the boats and whatever the case may be, you need them to start working. How are you going to teach them to work and they can't speak English? And these people are diseased from being on ships, right? And all this. How are you going to get these people to work? I don't care how much force you do, how much you beat them and whatnot. They'll be ready to kill themselves before they work for you. Because they already done been traumatized enough. So again, this had to happen over and over and over again. Does this even sound right? Does this even sound right? Does this even make any sense? Right? Does this even make any sense logically? Right? Would you keep bringing people over and you have to go through all of this stuff? Right? Would that, logically, as a business person, would it even make sense that you would keep doing this? You're going to keep bringing over a bunch of people who can't speak the language, who half of them got diseases, half of them died on their way in. Would it not make sense to capture or take people from other states who are already here and force them to work? People who know how to speak the language, people who are native to this land, people who know how to work, right? People who you could speak to, who done been around white people, because before there was slavery in this country, white people were freely moving around black people. People were freely moving around. Slavery didn't just start. You had started, which you had people who were indigenous, right? You had certain people that brought over slaves and whatnot. But like I said, that wasn't a big business like that, like they try to make it. Because there was a lot of risk that you took. That's why they insured slaves on that, like Lords of London and all of that, because people lost a lot of these slaves. So financially, economically, it wasn't a good move to import slaves, to bring them on that long journey and then have to teach them through the language barrier how to work. So you get people who are here, right, and you kidnap them and force them to work. That's what you do. Because the original colonies that set up here in America were all colonies that were based in New York, New Jersey, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, places like Caucasians settled in places like that. Not in the hotter regions where a lot of bronze people were. Bronze people were in these colder regions as well, but not as many. So when, it wasn't a lot, our people was in those regions, but they were in and out sporadically. So whenever these white settlers started settling into these regions, they would just basically kidnap whatever black population, so-called black population was being, forced them to work. That's how slavery really started, through kidnappings. So kidnapping and forcing people, right, into bondage, just going as just straight kidnapping people, selling people and whatnot, and then starting that system going. You see, that's how that happened. It wasn't no bunch of Africans they brought here and they naked and whatnot, and they standing on blocks and whatnot. Because if you look at the people that they show you on those blocks, they do not look like Africans. They look like so-called American black people. That's what you got here. You got American so-called black people here who were kidnapped, who were raped, the women, the men were raped, probably beaten, right? Broken mentally, right? Put on slave blocks. These people were kidnapped. Right? They show you, what did I say? Did they not show you that was a common thing where they would kidnap black people from different cities and states and bring them down south? Next thing you know, you working and you a slave down there. Right? And the slave population couldn't be but so big because, again, the so-called whites had to be able to police them. They didn't want a lot of slaves there. They wanted enough slaves to work, but not enough to overpower them. So, again, that's how it wasn't no big thing of slaves. It wasn't a big group of slaves, because if it was that many slaves, they would be afraid these people would overpower them. You might have had maybe close to 40 or 50 or 60 slaves per plantation. That's not a lot. Maybe 100 slaves at the most. There wasn't a lot of slaves. You had a lot of free black people moving around, so-called black people moving around this country. I put up a thing of this guy by the name of Dusable, right? This is a Haitian who founded Chicago, right? He founded Chicago. Jean-Baptiste, right? Jean-Baptiste Dusable. He founded Chicago, and he was born before 1750, right? He died he died in uh, 1818. He died. He was born before 1750. They're not sure when he was born, but he died 1818. Right? And he set up Chicago. So if black people were slaves here in the society, how was a so-called black man who they're trying to make him look white through the images? Right? How was a so-called black man able to set up Chicago if all black people were slaves here and brought here slaves? How was that able to happen? No, there were black people, so-called black people, moving around in this country, have always been moving around in this country before the slave trade was here. Slave trade was only a small, very small reason why black people got here. Very small. It was not a big slave trade thing here. All right? It wasn't, because again, you don't want people that you got to train. These people were ignorant that was coming here, like I said, these Irish and these Scottish and these ones who became the slave masters and whatnot down south. They were ignorant, you know, and they were like of English, and you know, they were basically white trash, right? And they were pretty much ignorant themselves. All right. They were telling you stories about how black people owned land here in this country before Caucasians even got here through the British. They were owning land here. So how were they able to own land before slavery? Answer, that it was always so-called black people in this country before the slave trade. There were always black people here. Now, when you tell that simple-minded black people, the ones who were on this Pan-African, we all came over here on slave ships, ask them factually about the Olmec Empire, which is factually a black, so-called black civilization, bronze civilization. We're just going to say bronze. I'm going to get into the bronze thing later. The Olmecs, which is factually a bronze civilization, so-called black civilization. Then you had the Incas, who were definitely a bronze civilization, where they trying to lie and say they were Mexican. We're going to get into that and prove that there weren't no Mexican Incas. All right? That the Incas, the Aztecs, and the Mayans were so-called black civilizations. So question, the Inca civilization went for 500 years in this country. 500 years. It's the oldest civilization here. You can look it up, according to the so-called white men. The Inca civilization is 500 years old. And the Inca civilization, just like the Olmec civilization, had a sophisticated system of government here. They want to lie and say, oh, these was tribal people. And then they wasn't through the history. They had a sophisticated form of government here. Pretty much like what you see now with the democracy here of the president and the senators and the congressmen. They called it something else. Okay? So they had this society here. They built those pyramids in Mexico because those people, the Olmecs, the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Mesoamerican people, right? That's what they call Mesoamerican. Middle American people, which constitutes your early founders, which were your Olmecs, your Aztec, your Mayans, and your Inca, which is all pretty much a lot of the same people, more mixed in, your Moors or whatnot, where they came in. That is the foundation of America. Those people, not the Caucasians, not the so-called Asians who you're calling Native Americans or Indians. Those people who you're calling Indians or Native Americans are not native to America at all. Those people who look like Asians and East Indians, because that's all your so-called Native Americans are, who they show you today, those brown-looking people with the straight hair, like fur, like the white man, those are Asians and East Indians mixed, who came over here in the crossing of the Bering Straits, and they mixed in with our people. They were the first invaders to this land called America now. They were the first invaders, these Asians. These Asiatic, they were the first invaders that came in and mixed in with our people. The Olmecs, the Aztecs, the Inca, and the Mayan. You can look that up. They were the first ones to cross the Bering Straits and mix in with our people. They ain't going to tell it to this extent, but this is how you started to see the early so-called Indians was dark, with straight hair and slanted eyes. That was from the mixing with these Asians that came here. So they're not Native Americans. All right? And all these people that, whatever the Caucasianism came afterwards, like I said, they damn sure not native. The only Native Americans, the only foundational Americans are so-called black people. Do you hear me? The only foundational black people here, the only foundational people here are so-called black people, a.k.a. bronze people. That is the only real Americans here. Okay? Everybody else came from someplace else. The white man came from England, Scotland, Ireland, wherever, Italy. They came from different places. Poland, Russia. They came from other places. They're immigrants. They are immigrants. The so-called Asians, the Indians, they came from across Asia and from the Bering Straits. And all the stuff they picked up as so-called Native Americans, the feathers, the arrows, the suede, and all this other stuff, that comes from the Olmecs and the Aztecs. You see, that comes from us. That don't come from them. Building they teepees like pyramids. If you look at them, they look like mirrors or pyramids. The feathers on their head and whatnot, that goes all the way back to the Olmecs and the Aztecs. So none of that is their culture. The reason why a lot of you so-called black people like the so-called Native American culture so much is because it's really related to you. It's not related to those Asians, because that's what those people are. They're Asians. They are Asians. So you need to stop with this black Indian nonsense or this Indian nonsense, period. The customs that you like so much, the feathers and the bows and the arrows, is Olmec. It is Olmec, Aztec, Mayan, or Inca. It's comprised of those four civilizations. That is the foundation of America, not nothing these Caucasians talk about. Now let's get into the word America. First and foremost, they say that the word America comes from Amerigo Vespucci. Now let's look up Amerigo Vespucci. I'm going to look him up. Let's see what they say about Amerigo Vespucci. Am I going too fast? I hope I'm not going too fast. I hope I'm not going too fast. Let me slow it down, because I'm on a roll here. I just came back from running, so I'm on a roll. All right. So the Mexicans, or who they call them Mexicans, are East Indians and Asians mixed. That's what they are, because there's only four races on the planet. It's so-called blacks, whites, East Indians, and Asians. That's the only races of people on the planet. Everybody from that is a subdivision or a subculture. There's no such thing as Mexican people. They are a subculture. They are nothing but East Indians and Asians mixed. That's what they are. Okay? Now, I'm going to ask you something. Now, factually, think about this. First they say that the so-called Indians, right? First they say the white men say the so-called Indians are Native Americans. But then they'll go and say that the Mexicans had all of America before the Indians. Most of America belonged to Mexico. Well, which one is it? So are you saying that the Mexicans are Indians and that they're the same people? Because I ain't never seen the Mexicans celebrate no Indian anything. So are you saying Mexicans and so-called Native Americans are the same? I never made that correlation, nor have I ever seen that. Those are nothing but different invaders, but they are the same race of people. Right? They are the same race of people. I'm going to cover everything tonight. Those people are nothing but East Indians and Asians. Okay? The word America does not come from Amerigo Vespucci. Now, ask yourself a question logically. I see 832. Let me just get this out. I see 832. I want to look up Amerigo Vespucci. Now, the funny thing is, they say America was named after Amerigo Vespucci, right? An Italian explorer. Question. How come they don't celebrate Amerigo Vespucci's birthday? How come you don't even know nothing about Amerigo Vespucci? They say he was born 1454, March 9, 1454. He died February 1512. How come nobody in America celebrates Amerigo Vespucci's birthday? How come that's not a holiday if this country's named after him? If he discovered America, how come you celebrate Columbus Day and not Vespucci Day? Or America Day or Vespucci Day, since this country is supposedly named after him? Answer: because it's not. It's not. This country is not named after Amerigo Vespucci. Let me take a quick call. 832.
Yes, so getting back to the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Incas, the Olmecs. So these are our people. Now, when we look at the documentaries and some of the books and stuff, they paint the picture that these people vanished basically into thin air. Okay, so you were going over how basically a lot of us became slaves. A lot of us, I guess just threw down that culture and just stopped living it. But how is that possible? How do you go from being the Mayans or the Incas or whatever, and then just that history, that culture just disappears overnight. So what I was thinking was what came to my mind was some type of, because of, what we were doing was not correct. It seems that we've had our memories wiped because we stopped having, at some point in time, we stopped having the type of minds that will create these cities and stuff that you're talking about. Now, they did do it back in Tulsa, and in the early 1900s, late 1800s, they kind of regained it again, but then it seemed like after that, it just our minds got wiped clean again. So can you kind of go into that just a little bit? I'm kind of confused on that, how it just disappeared, the culture just disappeared overnight.
Well, the thing is, it didn't disappear overnight because you had, again, 500 years of the Inca Empire is the longest going empire here in North America to this day. America's not even 300 years old yet. It didn't disappear. What America did, what the Caucasians did, is they absorbed a lot of the setup of the Incas, the Aztecs, the Mayans, and the Olmec into their government. That's how you got American democracy. That's where the word America comes from, because America is an amalgamation of words. The word America comes from the Amir people, or the Moors that were here, because the word Amir means prince in Arabic, and our people using the word Amir. The word Ica comes from the word Inca, which is the oldest civilization, 500 years in here. So, of course, it wouldn't disappear. And the people who are the descendants of these people, of course, they didn't disappear. They're right here in America being called African American falsely. The descendants of the Olmec, Inca, Aztec, and Mayan are here, and they just took us into slavery. That's how that worked. And a lot of these so-called Native Americans, absorbed our culture too. See, that's how culture don't disappear; it gets absorbed. They absorb because when George Washington, all those people came, when the Caucasians started coming here, they had no culture, they had no real anything. They had no real government because George Washington, they came from a government they came from a monarchy. They didn't have a government. So where did they get the idea for governing and having a democratic setup like they got now?
Okay, so that makes perfect sense. And another thing, I don't know if I read this or saw this or just had a vision about it, but all of the sewers, the piping, a lot of the roads and stuff like that, I think in my mind, how are these people... We're taught these white people came over on these boats. Well, where did they get the machinery to build all of these roads? Where did they get the machinery to build these sewer systems? They had to have already been built. And they kind of just made revamp. They revamped a lot of stuff that was here. A lot of stuff was already built up here already in the society, but they don't want to tell you that because it's like most of the people. Like they built up, it was still parts of America that in the eastern place, like I said, New York and all these other places. Even though it was bronze people here in New York City, it was our people was always setting up things in the city, but they didn't stay, as long as in certain places they would come and go and set up things But when the white man came, he basically went into regions where, it wasn't as populated or with small populations of us, and they would set up their shop there, and they would colonize in those areas like New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Connecticut, those coal regions. That's where they went to. They didn't go to places like Florida right away. They set up in these coal regions, and they set up their 13 colonies there. But because they knew it was black people, so-called black and bronze people here. It was the so-called Indians here. It was all that little mix of everything here. So it was an indigenous population here already. So they had basically started making up plans to overthrow the indigenous population and whatnot and absorb their culture. And that's all they did. And they made slaves out of the so-called black people that were here that were indigenous. That's how they did that through your little tribal wars that were going on with the so-called Native Americans, so-called Indians, and our people, because it's just like in this so-called Indian setup, you got certain black people calling themselves Cherokee and Washita and all these other. Those all come from the Olmecs. Those are all Olmec, Aztec, Inca, Maya. Again, that has nothing to do with the American Indians. Okay. So the reason why So that's the reason why on the History Channel, all these documentaries, they always say that, oh, well, the Incas and the Mayas, they just disappeared overnight, and we don't know, nobody knows what happened to them because this is what they're hiding, what you're explaining. Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Well, a lot of them, some of them got wiped out by the diseases of the white man and whatnot, but the mass majority of them, like I said, they spread off and became different people. They intermixed with the Asians and whatnot, or they just stayed here and became, over time, the so-called American Negroes.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, yeah, that was my question. Thank you for answering that.
All right. Now another call. 404.
Hey, what's up, my brother? Hey, look here, man. Hey, I'm 62 years old, man. So I know I'm kind of like an old dude, and that's a good thing, man. But look here, man. You know it was some giants over here too, right?
Some who?
Giants. Big people, man. Almost about, yes, sir. It was giants over here. Yeah, and you go, they got them, they found the bones. They had them in the Smithsonian Institute. And it was giants over here. And I don't know how they got died off or whatever happened. That's where the mounds and stuff at right here. Like in West Virginia, they found big mounds, man. But it's a whole bunch of stuff that's been left out, deleted. But I like what you be saying about the future, man. That's what I'm and see what the white man did when they came over here, like in Georgia, where I am. Okay, the so-called King George let them prisoners out in England and sent them right to Georgia, King George. And so, like you right, man. They wasn't but a bunch of devils and thugs and crooks and especially Georgia, man. But I'm like you, man, for the future, right? So the stuff I've been through, man, about this telepathy and all that. See what's gonna happen in the future, man. Okay, they perverted sound, man, because we ain't nothing but sound and light, bro. That's the main thing we are, sound and light. Okay, because when you see, you can look it up and see when the sperm hit the egg, it's a spark, man. It's a spark of electricity. That's light, man. Okay, and see, I'm 62, man. Back then, in the 60s and 70s, music was good. Love music. Them fools perverted sound, man. Even Hitler knew how to pervert sound. Okay, so the natural sound of the earth is 528 hertz, man. That's a love sound. If you listen to 528 hertz, you can almost change your DNA. All right, so I'm with the future, man. And all this other black, white, stupid stuff, bro. You see, they perverted sound. So what's gonna happen in the future? Sound will be eliminated, man. We're gonna go back to where we can talk to each other telepathy, man. All right, that's why you hear now. When they perverted sound in 1979, they did it in Hitler time too. But for us, they perverted sound in 1979, man. Okay, I remember it like it was yesterday, man. Okay, we was on the dance floor in 1979. They put on a song by Houdini, Wicked, 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 and all them women on the floor start turning around and turning their ass to the black man, man. Okay, I remember like yesterday. So ever since then, the music jacked up now, man. That's why this music now, anytime you hear it, it makes people want to fight and kill each other, man. These fools are jacked up sound, man. And so the Most High, I'm like you, man. I call them the Most High. Don't like this because they done got in the sound and messed sound up. And now, if I talk to you in the wrong way, you get in the wrong sound, you get mad. So I try to stay in 528 hertz when I talk to especially my people and black women particularly. If you talk to somebody the wrong way, the women get mad, man. A man get mad too. So I'm for the future now, man. I saw all this, man, back in the 70s when it was going to be a fight over water, when water was precious. Now they selling water at the bottom, man. So, bro, I'm right with you, man. I'm right with you with our men, man. I'm serious, bro. Okay, because our men is sound and light, man. Okay, our and men is sound. And then you got our men raw, that's sound and light, bro. Okay? And you know, in time when the brother be asking a question or whatever, we get into it, you say, oh, man, what the hell going on? You know what I'm saying? So I know exactly where you're coming from, man. I'm right with you, bro. And the future going to be all telepathy. That's what I'm working. We only use 10% of our mind, man. And once we, because I've been getting stuff been downloaded to me for years, man. And so I kind of listen to you. I kind of know where it's coming from, man. It's from the Most High. That's what I know, man. That's what I try to tell my people. Okay, and like you say, bro, our people, they don't want. You try to tell our people something, they don't want to hear. They want to argue and all that. Okay, and I'm gonna tell you something about. I know you. Okay, it was a man called Noah. Okay, he told them Negroes it was gonna flood. Them Negroes ain't listen. What the hell? They got drowning, man. All right, that's all us, man. So, hey, bro, I
thank you. I appreciate.
I done seen so angels and all that, bro. I'm gonna tell the story. I was in Florida, man. I
get you, Elder. I get you. We'll discuss that experience another time, Elder. I gotta go. I can't take up the line too long. Okay.
All right, peace and blessing, man. It's all our time, man. Hey, bro, the time is like you said. We finna move up, bro. All of us. The one that's woke, the ones that sleep. Fuck them, man. You know what I'm saying, bro?
All right. Thank you for calling. Man. Thank you for calling in, brother. Thank you. Respect. All right. Thank you. Yeah, so thank you, Elder. Shout out to the Elder. But yeah, so we have to realize that, you know, there's a trick that's been played on our people. And I'm gonna say this again. Like I said, the foundation of America, like I said, is the Aztecs, the Inca, the Mayan, and the Olmecs. That is the foundation of America. Not the English, not the Irish, not the Italian, not the so-called Indians or Native Americans or Mexicans and all these other people. They come from someplace else. Those are immigrants. The foundational bronze people, and I'm gonna get on this even at this black nonsense, which you allow the so-called white men to call us black people. Our skin is not black. Our skin is bronze. We have a bronze tone to our skin, a bronze tone to our skin, not a black. We don't have no black skin. That comes from the so-called white man and his desire to incorporate us into this business of government and society and call us black people as the foundational people or the bottom of the barrel. Because look at how they treat our people. They treat our people as the bottom of the barrel here in the society. But why is that? Because if we are allowed to rise, then we will take back over this country and the Americas as it was before. See, this is why they can't give you equality. How they say you give somebody an inch, they take a mile. They know how our people are, so they have to keep it us at the bottom for them to stay at the top. They have to keep it unequal. They have to make sure that they constantly are taking away from you or pushing you down or putting you down or keeping you down, as they say. That is systematically done. That is a governmental thing. So when you see racism, when you see the police shooting black children, so-called black people, black children, black women harassing you, when you feeling like you are basically not treated like an American citizen or American, or they harass, all the things they do here, redline your neighborhoods, basically you get the short end of the stick. They're doing that because the government that's currently here, they have a code instilled in them. They have a code in which they go by to make sure that all people classified as black people, African American or Negro, right, are kept down in certain ghettos, certain areas, systematically kept down. Now, you might see a few make some money in this, that, and the third, or whatever the case may be, but systematically they have to be kept down in order for Caucasians and others to stand up. In order for there to be a hierarchy of white people, there has to be a foundational, a bottom of so-called black people for which they stand on, because we are the foundation of this country. That's why they put us at the bottom. See, it's a bittersweet thing. They'll call us foundation. They'll call us, say that we people at the bottom, that we are the low-class people, the bottom people. But that also means that we are the foundational people here. They want to tell you that lie that we came from Africa on slave ships. Where exactly in Africa? They tell you West Africa. Oh, everybody come from West Africa. We all from West Africa, right? We all came from West Africa. That is factually untrue. They're making that up. Just like the other brother said, they try to act like the Mayans, the Olmecs, and the Aztecs and all these people disappeared. Where'd they disappear to? You talking about there were millions of people here, right? People who look like bronze people of today. I've seen Olmecs with faces look like Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, myself, bronze women. We have seen all kinds of so-called American black women. You've seen Olmec women look just like them, Aztec women that look just like them, all of these Mayan women that look just like them, all over the place, who are not Africans, who are not primitive, who are not tribal people, but governmental people. Look it up. Look up the Aztecs, the Olmecs, the Incas. Why don't they teach this as American history? Why is this not taught as American history? American history is taught as George Washington, the founding fathers, a.k.a. white people, when they came here. But that's not American history. That's a small, very small part of American history when you're dealing with this land. Because they'll tell you American history starts when these Caucasians got here. That's what they tell you. That's a lie. Bold-faced lie. There was governments here before this government was set up. And this is what this government copied from. You see, they talk about the Iroquois and the five, how they had the five setups of the democratic setup system they had in the Iroquois. But the Iroquois, where did they get that from? Where did these so-called Iroquois get that from? You're not going to be in a society where you had governments, societies that don't went for hundreds of years, and the next one that come up is not going to be influenced. That's like saying if tomorrow America ended, right? Let's just say America ended. You don't think that the people that's going to rebuild America, let's just say ain't no more white people here and America ended. You really don't think the people who are going to rebuild this country are going to take things from America because America been in power or been set up government for almost 300 years. Ain't nowhere near 300 yet. It's going to get there. They're trying to get there. But people are going to take from whatever system set up if they are around that. George Washington was living amongst black people. They was living amongst so-called blacks and so-called Native Americans and stuff. They was living amongst these people. You understand? They got these little separate states, but they moved amongst these people. They knew the setup that these people had. They wasn't like what you see today. They was trying to set their colony up. So they moved amongst so-called blacks. They moved amongst so-called natives and whatnot who still had the Inca, Mayan, Aztec, Olmec setups in their heads. They moved amongst them. The whole riding of the horse, the whole wearing the feathers in their hat, the whole suede and things like that, and eating the buffalo. All that comes from the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Olmec. That comes from them. The helmets on their head and whatnot, which they use. And like I said, the football and basketball really comes from the Olmecs and the Aztecs. You see, it got picked up later on and got, as they say, modernized by Dr. James Naismith and those people who they claim invented basketball. But again, we always had, because that's what they call it, Olmec people. The word Olmec meant rubber people. I forget what language it came from, but it meant the people were rubber people. I forget, it was a native language. I don't think it was there's no such thing as a Mexican language. That's Spanish. But they were referred to as the rubber people because they had rubber here they would produce, and they would make balls, and they would play games. You see? They talk about Quetzalcoatl and whatnot, and the Inca really comes from the word Inca or Inki. The Inca people, you'll see how, and going back to the ancient world, they said that these people had empires and civilizations. The Olmecs had empires and civilizations set up. At the same time, the ancient Egyptians had their civilizations and empires set up. They had that set up here in America already. So they already had a government here already. They already had governments that went for thousands of years, hundreds of years. So you're going to tell me you don't think that would influence the people of today? Of course it did. Of course it did. You want to let them tell you that we all came over here on some slave ships, that we all came out of Africa and whatever the case may be? Really? So why are we not welcome back? Why don't they want you over in that area? Why do they consider you, a lot of these Africans consider you to be foreign or strange to them? Why don't they consider you their people if you come from there? You see? They'll be nice to you and all this other stuff, but realistically, we got hundreds and hundreds of years here in America. And the term American, like I said, the term American did not come from Amerigo Vespucci. You know nothing about this man. It did not come from him. That is the Amir people and the Inca people. And all they did And when I looked up and I tried to find them, see if I could find this again. Who named this country America? They gave me very spotty information. What mouth did it come out of? What man did it come from who called this country America? Who called this country America? Was it the so-called founding fathers? Nope. Wasn't them. I'm gonna give you the name when I come out. I came across. I'm gonna look it up again. That who decided this place was going to be called America? It wasn't George Washington and them. They was calling this place the United Colonies at one time. That's what they call. I told you they colonized things like ants. They called us the United Colonies. And the United Colonies was basically the 13 colonies that they set up: New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, and North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, just those states. You see, that was the colonies. That was basically Caucasians trying to lay claim to the land. They took over the rest of the land over time gradually and took the land from their so-called Indians and all these other people. You see. And they had already started working with the so-called Indians to push out, because they didn't really, after a while, the so-called Indian tribes, they dominated in a lot of areas, so-called black people areas and whatnot. So blacks would mix in with them and be part of their tribes and whatnot. But that goes back to the Olmecs, the Aztecs, the Inca, and the Mayan. That goes all the way back to them. So they would try to mix in with those people and whatnot and basically gain a foothold. And so when the white man went to them, he went to them first and used them basically to help against the so-called black people. You see? That's why I said you can't trust these so-called Indians, these so-called fake Native Americans who call themselves Native Americans, because now you see the white man calling himself a Native American through that Indian connection. You see him calling himself Native American or Indian. He putting on feathers and painting his face. That's just another way for the so-called white man to try to put his foot in as a foundational American, and he's not a foundational American. They're not. How you going to be a foundational American when there was foundations already set up here? You came here and tried to build a foundation on top of another foundation. That's not foundational. You took from and absorbed the cultures of Aztec, Inca, Mayan, and the Olmecs that came through the so-called Native Americans. That's where they got their culture from. Again, those so-called Native American Indians that you Israelites keep talking about, they came from some Israel. They didn't come from no Israel. They're a bunch of East Indians and Asians that crossed over and mixed in with our people who were already here. You see? That's what that is. We're going to go more into this when we come back. I'm going to say something. This whole nonsense about us coming from Africa and whatnot, yeah, we have people in certain parts of Africa. Yeah, our people travel all over the place. But that's not saying anything. Africa, Asia, our people were everywhere. So what you saying, our people in South America, all over the planet. We went everywhere, right? I was in Antarctica before it got frozen, but we were everywhere. So what that's saying, what's being said now, since we are in America and we were born in America and all this nonsense that we came from Africa and slaves here into this country is a load of nonsense. The reason why they tell that lie is because they want to make it seem like we immigrated here. We're immigrants. See, because they already got mapped out who they want the so-called Native Americans to be. They already got, the white man already got that mapped out. He already got it mapped out on who he wants the so-called Native Americans to be, because, see, he can tie in with those people, which he ended up doing, right? So he has to make us the last of the immigrants so that we don't have any claim to this land, right? He has to make us the last of the so-called immigrants here, because, again, they got America as an immigrant country. America has become an immigrant country. The people that set up the government who are currently running the government are from someplace else. They're not Americans. They're not real Americans. The real Americans are the people who actually founded this land first, the people who set up society here first, and it was clearly not the white man. That goes without saying. So how the hell can he tell you what an American is? That name American does not come from Amerigo Vespucci. They only called us African Americans to make us seem like we were brought here from someplace else, because they didn't want to tell you the truth that you were kidnapped from places already here in this country. The Solomon Northup story is a real story where a guy, 12 years a slave, was kidnapped and taken down south and made to be a slave. That's what happened with a lot. I told you, with children. They would that whole human trafficking and taking women and taking children. That's nothing new. That's old. They've been snatching up women and children off the streets and places where free, so-called free black people was and whatnot. Then they start setting up slave regions like the South and things like that, and they would kidnap free black people or just take those who lived in that area into bondage. Jim Brown, the football player, told a story about how his family, they're those Geechees from like South Carolina. What do they call those people? Those Geechees from South Carolina, those South Carolina Geechees, right? He told this story about how his ancestors were saying how the Caucasians that moved into those areas, it was like back in the 1800s, something like that, told them, oh, we gonna take you as slaves. They was like, we ain't being no slaves for y'all. You gonna have to kill us. And they meant that, and they was like ready to fight. We gonna kill you, one or the other. After Jim Brown told that story, he said, you ain't taking us as no slaves. So what they was basically doing was stepping to black people with guns in hand, telling them you gonna be our slaves. That's how they did that. They would step into free black, so-called black people in this country, guns in hand and whatnot. And if you went for it, and they could take you and tell them, oh, this is the law now. Now you a slave here. You in a slave territory. So if you overnight, they'll change a place. Once they colonize it and they see you there, it's a slave territory. So now if you in the territory, you under the law, under their fake ass law, now you get to be a slave under these people. And they'll come right to where you living at and tell you a slave now. Come with us. That's how they did it. You see? That's how they did it. Gullah Island, exactly. They said, we ain't working for you. So that proves to you they was approaching so-called free black people and taking them into bondage. They was doing that. Guns in hand and everything, and the government allowed them to do that because they said the states were independent, and the states, once they passed those, these are slave territories, these are territories where slavery will be allowed. They basically was stepping to you and just taking you. That's how slavery got going. We set up the trade system here because we started trading here. We set up America and set up posts here in America because we was using America for trade. So we was the real ones that set the trading system here way before the New York Stock Exchange, which is a trading, which is for trading. Who set up the first stock exchange here? They started setting it up and whatnot, and they started trading slaves, and they started trading other stuff. But again, trading was set up by our people here in this country. So again, everything the white man is doing in America as Americans came from us before. Came from us as the Olmecs, came from us as the Aztecs, came from us as the Inca and the Mayans. They are not doing anything that we didn't do first as the first Americans here in this country. That's facts. They want to hide that, and they got a lot of these Negroes, these black African, pro-black Negroes that's just overlooking this real history. They overlooking this real history, right? They keep wanting to play on the African narrative that we got brought over here as slaves. Who's telling them to teach that? Who's telling them to teach that? But see, now the truth is coming out more and more. The truth is coming out more and more. You see, I told you again, so you understand the word America comes from us. We are more American than we can ever be so-called African. So stop with this African garbage. That word Africa comes from the white man. The word America comes from the white man. However, he got it from our people. He took it and comprised it from the people that were already here because they were trying to fit their way in. They were trying to fit their way into a system that they felt they could take and, restore and, put some fixes in and, incorporate themselves into it. Again, the word Amir comes from the word Amir, which comes from the word prince, the Arabic word, from the so-called Moors who were here in this society. The so-called black Moors, another way of saying black or bronze people, right? The ones who was over there, the ones who got influenced by Islam, they was here into this country, right? So the word Amir, because that word meant prince, right? Or princes, those people refer to themselves as Mir. So that word Amir comes from them. The word Ica comes from the word Inca. which was the people that was here for 500 years who had the first government set up. That's where a word America or Amir Inca comes from. Amir Inca or America comes from them. Does not come from no Amerigo Vespucci. You don't even know who he is. He just so happened to be named Amerigo. And if the word America comes from Amerigo Vespucci, then again, how come they don't celebrate his birthday? How come they treated Italians bad in this country, since they claim all, America come from him? Because according to them, Christopher Columbus was Spanish or Italian and Amerigo Vespucci, but they treated those people like crap over here in this country. Why would you treat those people like crap, but then you don't consider them white, but then you name the country after these people? You name America and South America after these people, and Central America after these people. And who was the person that named it America? Who named it that? See, they're not going to tell you that. I'm telling you the real origin of the word America. So it comes from the Inca people and the Amir people. That comes from our people. I told you the governments did not disappear. They were absorbed. They were absorbed. The ways of the earlier governments were absorbed into what you see today. You see, they were absorbed. The people did not disappear. They're right here today being called African American. The descendants of the Aztec, Inca, and the Mayan and the Olmec people are right here today in America. That is American culture. The Aztecs, the Inca, the Mayan, the Olmec, that's American culture. Not no British, English, that's not American culture. That's why they call themselves, when they come here, they don't even call themselves American. They just started doing that. If you notice, they just started doing that. White people just started calling themselves American. But before it was Italian American, Irish American, Jewish American. They would put something before American. So they was letting you know they come from someplace else. They come someplace else before they American. That's why they wouldn't put American on their thing. Now they just started doing that. You see, they just started doing that. And don't fall for the so-called Native American, or because again, they can't tell you where their language come from or where they come from before America. They can't tell you that. They can't tell you why they link up or why they have the same genetic material and blood type as the so-called and the same genetic material as the so-called Asian. Now, if these so-called American, you take so-called American Indians with the straight hairs, slanted eyes, the brown skin, you take them and you put their DNA up against Chinese or the Mongoloid people, it's the same DNA. It's the same DNA. The Eskimos, the so-called Indians, the so-called Mexicans, all those people are Mongoloids, man. They East Indians and Asians. They Mongoloids. You understand that? Those are Mongoloids. You see? And a lot of the so-called blacks, some of them had guns and whatnot, but, guns were still pretty much a new thing to this territory. It was still pretty much a new thing. They had bows and arrows and stuff like that, knives, but guns was pretty much still a new thing here. So when these Caucasians got guns and they started making the guns, that's how they was able to step to and start taking slaves. Without that, they wasn't doing nothing, because again, they was just like getting the guns up and going. That's why they came over here and they was all friendly and everything at first. But when they started getting their gun game, they didn't have a lot. When they started getting them guns imported, that's when they started taking over stuff. That's when they started showing you who they really was about their colonizing, when they got their hands on the guns. But before they had their hands on the guns, they wouldn't come and doing nothing. You see? They wasn't going to come and do anything. Any place where you seen, you might have had earlier where they invaded, like the Romans and all them other people invaded and stuff like that. But 9 times out of 10, when they invaded countries, it's usually because the people who was in that country was a bunch of Uncle Toms, and they would let the Caucasians come in there and, stay there and, be amongst them. And they basically got a foothold, and then next thing you know, they take it over. That's usually how they do it. Rarely will you see them just straight up attack a country and take it. Rarely will you see that. Even in ancient Egypt and them places like that, They basically moved over there. You know, you had to have some Uncle Toms who let them in the country and let them chill there and live there and stay there. Next thing they taking up residence there. Next thing they learn, they join in like certain departments and areas. Next thing you know, they become spies. They mix in with the women. So it's a gradual thing. That happened in America too. That same thing happened in America too. The white man didn't just come over here and attack America. He saw the so-called blacks over here, the Asians over there, India. He came over here. He started mixing with these people and whatnot, giving these people diseases. Certain places he took up areas and residence for himself. So it was a gradual thing over time. It was a gradual thing over time. You see, you talking about something that might took like 100 years or something. So as soon as the white man got here, let's say he got here about 1400s and whatnot. He got up in here the 1400s, and so you talking about from the time George Washington them got around here, you talking about 300 years, man. You talking about so George Washington didn't start coming about until what, the 1700s? The American whole thing, the setup. That so the white man started coming over here in what, the 1400s? There wasn't no damn slavery. It wasn't no slavery and no really before that time. You understand? It wasn't no slavery. They was just getting their foothold in. I got to look up that 1555 because again, the white man wasn't in power like that to be bringing no slaves here. You understand? He wasn't in power like that. He didn't start really taking hold and setting up a government till the 1700s. There was no government prior to that time. So if you come on 1400 to 1500 to 1600, you know, almost 200 years before they was able to get their foothold in. But it was bronze people going back to them before. They was already in the society. You understand that? They already was they were setting up. They took 300 years to get comfortable with the people, mixing in with the people. Then eventually they made their move. It took a couple of hundred years, literally a couple of hundred, over 200, 300 years before they felt bold enough to take the whole country. And even that still took time. Let me take a call. 504.
Yes, sir. I was, excuse me. I was tuning into your program, and I had was listening. Now, so let me get this straight. So, you do not believe that there was a transportation of Africans from the continent for 400 years by different European nations here? You don't believe that?
No, not a strong one, and let me explain why. I'm gonna tell you why. Think about this. Now, they tell you that they brought all black people over here into this country as slaves, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but they show you prior to white people getting here, there were full-on black civilizations, so-called black civilizations here, like that went for hundreds of years, talking about the Olmecs, which is undeniably a so-called black society that was here set up. The Incas, which was a black society, was set up for 500 years. So what I'm saying is if you have full-on societies going here and government set up here before the white man got here and they was having children and things like that, where did the children go? Where did the people go? So that would have to prove that there were black people here before slavery, right?
Well, I've never known the Olmecs or the Incas or the Aztecs to have been black people. Okay. Because, I mean, I actually see I've gone to Mexico several times. I've actually seen the people who are descendants of the Aztecs. They don't look what we consider black people.
That's false. I'm gonna tell you why. Look up the documentary on the real Aztecs, Incas, and the Mayans. The real Mexico right now, the majority of the Mexicans, which they don't show you because you have a huge so-called black population of Mexicans in there that they hide. They don't show you that.
We know. Yes, sir.
Let me finish. The Mexicans, the so-called pale Mexicans or those brown-looking Mexicans, they are the same ones who are culturally appropriating the image of the Olmecs. They are not the descendants of the Olmecs. They're not. It's the black people that are there in Mexico, the Afro-Mexicans. Those are the descendants. And the American so-called black people over here are the descendants of the Olmecs, not those people. Because if you look at the image and the lips, the noses and things like that, even the hair texture, you will see that those are so-called black people. Those are not Mexicans. And then you have to ask yourself, where did those people come from? Because there's only 4 races on the planet. There's white, there's black, there's Asian, and there's East Indian. That's it.
Well, I can tell you from my personal ancestry, my ancestors came from the African continent. Okay, so I have the documentation. I have the documentation for that. Okay, and my ancestors were enslaved. My ancestors were enslaved by the various white nations who existed here in North America. In Louisiana, where I am, the French and the Spanish, and in the other parts of America, the English-speaking British, Irish, or whatever whites.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, I just showed you that there were black societies here before the white ones set up here and whatnot. So
okay, maybe I don't come from them. I don't come from any of the black societies that were set up here.
Okay, but so you saying, okay, but hold on. So you saying that, and what part of Africa did your people supposedly come from?
From the western part down to the central and southern part, from approximately Senegal all the way down to what is Angola, and some from Mozambique and Madagascar.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So you checked this up on Ancestry DNA, the Ancestry.com, or you looked this up yourself?
Well, we've done this archival research right here in Louisiana, where we've been for over 2 centuries. Who was baptized, where their parents were born, etc.
Okay, so if black people, so I'm just using the term black people because that's where everybody understands. If black people moved all around the continent, and that's factual, we moved all around the continent with black people pretty much everywhere and whatnot. So if, let's say, you got some family members in certain parts of Africa or certain parts of Europe or certain parts of Asia, would that mean that they are indigenous to that area just because they lived in that area at a certain time and they moved about? See, my argument is that, you know, being that black people found the first civilizations here in this country, they are the real Americans. But sir, how can you cut out a whole chunk of world history that's very well documented, that people from Europe transported Africans from the African continent for approximately 400 years, populating these parts of the world? That's falsification of history. But who documented
to just even declare that that's false?
Hold on, who documented that?
It's documented by various sources. Even the blacks themselves who were on the slave ships wrote their. Even the blacks themselves who were on the slave ships themselves wrote about their ordeals and where they came from in Africa.
How did black people on slave ships be able to write anything? How were they able to do that?
Well, they came by living among the people and what languages they spoke. They acquired those skills to be able to speak and read and write those languages. Okay,
but they wasn't writing back then. They wasn't allowed to write back then. So how were they able to write?
No, that's not true. There were exceptions to that rule. That wasn't a universal, all encompassing rule.
Okay, but so what you're telling me is, if they brought all these black people over here, how many different accounts do you have of black people coming from Africa? Because the biggest thing you heard about that they put on was that whole thing with Roots with Alex Haley, right?
Well, I mean, there are more things than just that, sir. There are tons of documentation of people, of African people themselves who were enslaved, in court testimonies, if not writing it themselves. They tell what nation they were from. Pardon?
You got to give me.
Many of the blacks who participated in slave revolts, when they were given a trial, they testified what nations they belonged to and where they were from in Africa.
Okay, but I never heard that before. But what I did,
because
wait a minute, brother, hold on. What I do acknowledge, yeah, did they have black people in slavery? Yeah. Did every black person come from Africa? Absolutely not. That's false. Did you have certain black people, like I said, did they take? I said why it wasn't a big deal or why it wasn't a big thing transporting slaves, because I just explained to you from a business perspective that they didn't have the technology or the ships or the holding to carry those slaves like that and to keep constantly doing that. You talking about losing cargo. The whole point of transporting slaves is for business. So again, is it smart to transport people from one place to another, who people who are going to get sick, people who can't speak the language, people who you got to beat to try and work, or would you just take people that's already here and just force them to work?
Well, the bottom line is the people that were taken from Africa were doing the labor for the people that were disappearing and dying here.
What was that?
Well, that was growing the sugar cane, growing the indigo, growing the tobacco, eventually growing cotton.
But you got to get
and here go another thing. Hold up. It is very well documented that the Africans that were brought here were skilled in doing those things in Africa, like growing cotton, because they were growing cotton on the Niger River in those parts of Western Africa, growing rice. But they were not growing rice. Blacks were not growing rice here before they were brought here as slaves in Africa. They were growing rice in Africa.
Well, again, maize. Do you know what maize is?
Yes, corn.
Corn, exactly. Where was corn grown at? Where was corn first grown? How did they start growing?
Yeah, but corn was not the cash crop the Europeans were making their money off of. They were making their money off of sugar cane. They were making their money off rice. They were making their money off indigo, and they were making their money off cotton. Okay, that's what built Europe. That's what built Europe, and that's what built the Americas. Not corn.
Okay, but my point is this. You're saying that they grew these things. These things are going to grow. What they used those people for was to rip these things out of the ground, cut the cane, pick the cotton, and things like that. That wasn't no skilled labor.
It is a skill. Growing rice, sir. Growing rice is a skill. Europeans had no knowledge of rice growing. The Africans and the Niger Delta had been growing rice for thousands of years. That's a skill. Horses. Hold up, wait a minute. Okay. African ethnic groups were skilled horsemen. They brought them as horsemen, blacksmiths. They were blacksmiths in Africa. They brought them here, and here in New Orleans, where I live, when you go to the French Quarter and you see that ornament design wrought iron, that was done by Africans from Senegal and Mali, in those places. They had blacksmithing guilds. Pardon?
But what you're talking about, but the Senegal and the Mali and those people that came, I'm talking about the people that predate the slavery that came here before them, because there was millions of black people here that were not slaves.
There was no evidence of Africans growing rice in the Americas prior to being brought here under enslavement. There's no evidence of them growing cotton. There's no evidence of them planting sugar cane, etc.
But you saying growing and planting, that stuff, you first and foremost, stuff grows out of the ground naturally already. You can't really
Not in the Americas.
Okay, but if they're planting this stuff here, my argument to you is, you saying that they grew that here, and I got no problem with that. But to say that they were brought here and they were brought here to grow that here just so that they can be enslaved.
The Africans.
Let me finish, brother. But what you're saying about them being brought here to grow that's incorrect. If that was here, they came here on their own and started growing this stuff and planting it here. And then the white man started forcing them to pick that stuff and take the stuff up.
No, there's no documentation of that, sir. You can't produce any documentation of that.
What you're saying. Nobody here to grow
you have to do a little bit more.
Let me say this. They brought them here to do labor, brother. They didn't bring them here to do no skill growing.
They brought them here. They brought people who had skills and knowledge about a plethora of things that the Europeans, for example, cattle herding and cattle raising. There are ethnic groups like the Fulani who are cattle herders. There was no cattle here in the Americas before the white Spaniards came.
Where'd the buffalo come from?
That's not cattle. That's not domesticated. That's not domesticated. Buffalo is wild. Okay, cattle is domesticated. Cattle is domesticated animal. Pardon?
People were herding buffalo. What are you talking about? Before they were cow, people were herding
buffaloes are not domesticated.
It don't matter if
cattle are domesticated.
But people were herding them. People were eating them. People were taking their.
Yeah, but African people wasn't herding them.
Okay, well,
African people wasn't herding them.
Obviously, they were. They were. You talking not Africans, but I'm talking about the early Olmecs and all these people. Hold on, brother. The early Olmecs and the Aztecs, they show images on walls with the
early.
Hold on, brother. Hold on. They show images of them herding buffalo and things like that. They were dealing with buffalo before any slave trade. They were dealing with eating buffalo meat. That's where the so-called Indians get the whole thing of eating buffalo from.
Okay, look, before I get off, could you give me 3 sources that I can follow up on your perspective so that I may be further educated in school? Could you give me at least 3 sources?
Which sources do you want?
Whatever sources you give me. I asked for 3 sources.
You can check up on YouTube. Just look up the Black civilization. Hold on. Just look up Black civilizations and whatnot. Olmec, Aztec, and Inca, Mayan empires. That's what you gotta look up. You got plenty of.
Could you give me something that's published? Could you give me something that's published that show me documents? That show me documents and that show me.
Okay, what you can look up again? Just look up Olmec, Aztec, Inca, and Mayan civilizations, Black civilizations before American civilization. That's all you gotta look up.
That's a book. That's a book.
Hold on. You'll get plenty of authors, and you'll get documentaries on that. That's all you gotta look up.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, sir, besides referring me to a YouTube video, you can't name me printed sources.
I just gave you what to look up. If I gave you name, I don't have an offhand scholars or so-called authors.
Sir.
Hold on, brother. Hold on, you interrupting me, sir. All you got to do is look up Olmec, Aztec, Incan, and Mayan empires, Black empires and societies that came before America, but came before pre-colonial America. That's all. And you'll get all your information right there. That's it.
All right, so you're not able to give me the sources. Thank you. I'll continue to listen.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. You wanted a white man source. That's what you wanted. He wanted a white man source. That's all he wanted. He wanted to hear the white man say. Because he set up here talking about, we was brought over. First of all, and I wasn't going to get into it with you, who called you African? Did that come from a so-called black man? Did the word African come from so-called black people? You should call back, sir, because you wanted them people, and I hear it in you. You wanted to hear the white man say. Because if I just told you, all you got to do is look up the Aztec, Inca, Olmec, and Mayan civilization, because obviously you don't want to hear that. You a black man, and you accepted that you were slave, and that they brought you over here. Because again, it don't even make no sense what you said. They didn't bring anybody over here to show them how to do anything. They was already doing that over here. They just brought you here to work. They didn't bring you here to do no skill, nothing. You making that up, man. You see, that's why, like I said, this is the problem, as I told you, the black people that will come in here and they still want to be slaves and they still want to be believing that they came here on a slave ship, pissing and shitting on themselves. This is what they want to believe. We'll be right back, man. All right, we back. Sir, if you're still listening, I hope you're still listening on the line. See, you said you wanted literary historians who, so I could use as a reference. The first one you could look up is They Came Before Columbus, the African Presence in Ancient America. The presence of he's used the term African, but the African presence of Ancient America by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. That's one by Ivan Van Sertima. Ivan Van Sertima. The next one is A History of African Olmecs, Black Civilizations of America, from Alfred Barton. Look that up, sir. And there's another one. There's plenty of these books. That's why I told you it was too many to name and be looking up right now. That's why I told you. Just go and type in ancient black society, Olmec, Aztec, Inca, and Mayan. You'll get videos on them. You'll get books on them. But see, you wanted to win an argument, sir. You didn't really want to listen because it's already in your mind, like a lot of you old blacks, that you came here as slaves. So therefore, you got a slave mentality. The next book up, you can look up America's First Civilization by Richard A. Dell. That's who you can look up. Olmecs, America's First Civilization by Richard Dell. They Came Before Columbus. And I know you had to hear these books, sir, by Ivan Van Sertima. You sound like you were elder, you old, but you came here wanting to be, just wanting to be combative and disagreeable. You know, that's all you came in, and you really probably want to hear some white meat quote some Caucasian. That's really what you want. And History of African Olmec Black Civilizations of America by Alfred Barton. I gave you 3 right now. You gave me nothing but, what I studied and what I read and what I heard. That's all you gave me. I gave you 3 reputable sources right now. Let me come and take this quick call. 5 minutes. Yo.
Intellectual, good evening.
Good evening. Gotta be brief. I got 5 minutes.
Yeah, I know it is a short time, Intellectual. Let's start. I know you got 5 minutes. Intellectual, as you were stating, the so-called transportation to and fro the west coast of to the east coast of America, the proximity, as I was reading, the approximate miles is about over 8,900 miles. Okay, and then, Intellectual, during the quest, when the so-called when the Europeans was supposed to be going into Africa to so-called get trades, get the slaves, they say they would have to take supplies of water to last for 2 years, water and food to last for 2 years. That is impossible to bring back them many so-called 100 million slaves to and fro from the west coast to the east coast of from the Atlantic Sea, from the west coast of Africa to the east coast of America. It is impossible. It is impossible.
Exactly. This is what I was trying to explain to him. That's why I told him the slave trading that was going on was in America. It was people being brought from South America to North America, people being kidnapped. That was your slave trade. It was people that were already here in America. I never disputed that black people were enslaved, certain black people were enslaved, but not every black person. And that really circled around America, not Africa.
And Intellectuals, they ships, the European ships, with the sails, it took them, the length they could travel within a day are only 100 miles. That's with the sails, only 100 miles. And it could only hold a crew of 80, supposedly, no more. Okay, Intellectual, I hate that I called in late. I apologize. You have a peaceful evening, sir.
You good, brother. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I'll call back. Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. So, just to debunk the foolishness. Let me go ahead and read this. Are we black Africans or bronze Americans? Bronze Americans. We the only real Americans here, man. Everybody else migrated here. We didn't come here on no damn slave ships. You might have had a few, but very few that came here. And even if they joined into us, they are now bronze Americans too, man. We the only real Americans here. The foundation of America is built on us, not on no Europeans, not on no Caucasians, and not on no Asians. Why are we calling ourselves black Africans? Because you were trained to call yourself black Africans, just like that call that called and told, we was brought from Africa, and we was brought to grow cane and grow. And you was not. You wasn't brought here to do nothing. You was brought here to work. They already had people here harvesting that already. And obviously it was black people, so-called black people, bronze people doing that. We was already growing that here. Who called us African Americans? Jesse Jackson. Because, again, they wanted to create that whole idea that we came from someplace else, and rather than the reality that we were right from here, that we set up the first foundational government here in this society before the white man, before the so-called Asians who mixed in with us and start calling themselves Indians. We the only real Americans here. Everybody else came from someplace else. That's fact. We the first ones that came here and set up. So, again, just by that, we the first Americans and the only one. And the word American comes from us. They're mere Inca people. Are so-called black people Native Americans? Yeah, we really are the Native Americans. We are the indigenous and the foundational Americans. Nobody else. Who settled America first? Bronze people, so-called black. Bronze people settled America first. Ain't come through no slave, no white man, ain't no Asians, and none of these Mexicans settled no America first. That's a damn lie. They came when we was already set up here. So if anything was growing here, we was growing. And that's it. We're going to close out in the name of Amen, by the power of Amen. And Amen we trust, and Amen we thank, and Amen we continue forward forever. I am the intellectual NUBEN MENKARAYZZ. This has been Mentellect Radio. Good night.
It's the Republic of Mentellect, rising out the black race to the white race, out the black race to the white race. It's the Republic of Mentellect, black race to the white race. If it's hail Amen, then it's hail us. They tried everything just to spell us. Fed us religion, gave us fake gods. Through all of that, we beat the odds. Now we coming together. that's me and you. The infinite capabilities